Good evening, everybody. My name is Ricardo Gibson, and I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the Theta Lambda chapter. I serve as the chair of the Voteless People as a Hopeless People Committee, as well as our Sociological, Economic, Political Involvement, and Action Committee, also known as SEPIA. I have the pleasure to moderate tonight's webinar, Civic Health is Public Health. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and this year's theme is More Good Days Together, which reminds us of the importance of community, support, as well as the urgent need to break the stigma surrounding mental health challenges. Tonight, our conversation will focus on Black male mental health and the ways public policy shapes both outcomes as well as lived experiences. The experience of Black men in this country is unique. Our mental health is affected by both personal as well as systemic societal challenges, which results in inequitable policies that deepen disparities like in employment, education, housing, healthcare, public safety, and overall quality of life. Many of these challenges begin in childhood, where Black boys are disproportionately subjected to school suspensions, expulsions, and placement in special education programs. Over the course of our lives, these experiences shape our chronic trauma, stress, as well as provides emotional exhaustion. Too often, Black men are expected to carry the weight of trauma, financial responsibility, and societal pressure, all in silence. Tonight, it is important that we create space for a real and honest conversation, not just to discuss the challenges, but to explore healing and practical solutions. We're fortunate to have a distinguished panel of experts who will share their thoughts, experiences, and perspectives on this critical issue. Before we begin, just want to give a few housekeeping notes. For those watching, you can submit your questions online via the chat, and we will try to address them when it's time for the Q&A portion. If you want to share this discussion on social media, please use the hashtag Black Men's Mental Health. That's once again, Black Men's Mental Health. We will have about a 40-minute panel discussion followed by a Q&A. At this time, I would like to turn it over to our panelists. We're going to give each panelist about 30 seconds to introduce themselves. And I would like to start with Dr. OK Enya, if you're available, just to give a brief overview of who you are and let the audience know.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Yes, I am Dr. OK Enya. I'm really excited to be part of this very important conversation. Yes, my background is in medicine, public health, health policy, politics, research, and teaching. I have a multifaceted background that covers serving as a scholar activist, a policymaker, and a two-time book author. My book is called The John Henry Health Equity Playbook. It is a 4-year health policy agenda for Black men. I'm on a book tour now, and I also have a Substack, a blog as well. And I also have a not-for-profit called the John Henry Institute for Black Men's Health and Policy Innovation. So I'm really excited to bring to bear my background to this very important conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Enya. I would like to turn it over to Mr. Michael Bland, if you could introduce yourself.
Hey, good evening, brothers. So happy to be with you all tonight, and thank you for Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity for hosting this very important conversation. My name is Michael Bland. I'm the executive director of Black Men Vote, where I serve as the executive director of our 501c3, C4, and our 527 PAC. Look, this is Mental Health Month. This is important. This is a conversation that I don't take lightly or arrive lightly at all, given the space that we're in, particularly politically, understanding that mental health is weighing on brothers around the country. That shows up in data, that shows up in polling. So very happy to be part of this conversation with this esteemed panel.
Thank you, Mr. Bland. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Dimitri White, who is one of our newest initiatives in Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. So, Brother White.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Dimitri White. I have the privilege and honor of serving as a school psychologist for the District of Columbia. Ultimately, my background deals with neuropsychology, educational and mental health consulting, along with intervention specialists. So ultimately, I do the research to assure what can help our Black youth, our Black men, and ultimately our communities that are involved within our community, and at the same time find out the best intervention strategies in order to supply our communities with strategies to help out within any type of social and economic problems, academic problems, or anything along the lines of health. Additionally, furthermore, I evaluate for different levels of whether it's special education or just mental health needs and diagnostics. Thank you all so much for having me this evening.
Thank you, Brother White. And I will turn it next to Brother Isaac Ford, who is a brother of Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated out of San Diego.
Well, thank you, brothers, for allowing me to be a part of this, and thank you for your leadership. My background is I'm a retired Marine, clinical social worker, worked in mental health, medical and hospice social work. I'm also an author, soon to be two-time author. My first book, Up From the Bottom, a memoir. It's about tragedy, resilience, forgiveness, and unconditional love. It's used as a blueprint for master's and doctoral students in mental health. And the second book, which will be out in the next month or two, is called The Smile of War. The Scars Are Earned, Healing the Boy and Forgiving the Man. It talks about vulnerability, it talks about trauma bonds and how those things show up in our relationships. And so I'm an advocate, one from the standpoint of having been a childhood trauma survivor. And so glad to be a part of this discussion and this important discussion at this time, which is really important for right now, what's going on in our country. So thank you, brothers.
Thank you, Brother Ford. And I believe that is the last of our panelists. So I want to kind of start as we look, with a personal kind of perspective on this. We talked about societal pressures. Brother Ford, I wanted to start with you. Black men often face societal pressures, whether it's to excel at work, provide for your family, maintain your community roles. How do you, any struggles you may have or difficulties you're having at that time?
Well, thank you for your question, Brother Doctor. First and foremost, just say I've spoken for the last 7 years on the heels of my first book, and I would often have a conversation with college students, and up front I say, the book that you read was the G version. And what I meant by that was that, sometimes even when we're being vulnerable and when we're sharing, as Black men, we have to be guarded, even then. And so for many, many years, as I speak to in my second book, even though I was an open book and sharing and trying to do this work, I was lying by omission because it's a very, very, it can be very precarious as Black men when we share and we get to show too much vulnerability. And that's from a historical standpoint back from slavery all the way up. And that's not just from a professional standpoint, but that's also in our relationships. And so the fact that we're starting to have more conversations about mental health and specifically how it affects our communities and showing that you can be strong. You can have your man card checked and also still be vulnerable enough to be able to say, hey, I'm going through something right now. And it may not only is that also a sign of strength, but vulnerability is not weakness, it's strength. But it may even save lives.
Thank you, Brother Ford. I think that's a great way to start. Michael, you in your opening comments, you kind of sparked a couple of ideas that sparked in my head. We talk about the current climate. We have rising unemployment, economic instability, increase the cost of living. Many Black men feel like they're always in survival mode. How does this constant pressure impact Black male mental health, and what coping strategies, do we have out there for men who are dealing with so much on their plate at a time where it's so much that you can't control?
I don't know why I just got the most loaded question given a man South Avenue 20 decades. I mean, that's two decades. Look, I think we're in a time that we're not unfamiliar with, but it's new to us. And I think given the reality of how we navigate, raising our family, showing up at work, showing up for our family, showing up in our social groups, showing up for everybody, but sometimes ourselves. We are the biggest purveyors of the mask. And when I say the mask is, we walk around with this mask every single day. And I think for me, the biggest coping mechanism that I could recommend for brothers is one, write it down. Leaving it in your head is a scary place. It's a place where you can get caught up in a dark place. So you got to write it down and you got to get it out. The second is you got to talk to somebody. And I can tell you as somebody who, we all have our mental health journey. And sometimes you say, hey, I'm scared to talk to somebody, or when somebody lends you their ear and they say, I'm here. The reality is take them up on that. But I would say just remind them, be prepared for what I'm going to tell you if you really want to, say you want to be here for me. But you have to write it down. You have to talk to somebody. And you have to stay prayed up. You have to stay prayed up, and you're not in this by yourself. And I think that's the reality. And in this climate, what matters most is how we show up for each other in community and how we constantly show up and support each other, no matter the time, no matter the place.
Yeah.
It's important.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. I wanted to kind of switch it to talk about a lot of this, trauma that we experience. It's something that happens to us as children. And so, Dr. White, as a, person who's focusing in child psychology, how do early experiences like school discipline disparities or exposure to trauma affect the mental health of Black boys as they grow into adolescence and to adulthood, from what you've seen?
Yes, I greatly appreciate the question that you're asking right now. Ultimately speaking, it appears in multiple ways through how Black boys and Black young men socialize, how they interact, and how they adapt to current climate. We get to a point of looking at suspension rates, looking at why are our Black boys are being disciplined, why are Black boys being labeled or identified for special education. We are trying to find the answer in retrospect of why can't we live in an environment in which Black boys and Black young men can adapt and respond to the structure of societal norms. It's because we are an abnormal species. We are a normal species in the retrospect of we care in a different way. We hold a lot of trauma. We are leaders in our communities. Even at the age of 9, 10, 11, 12, we are the stakeholders within our family. We have to care for our younger siblings and sometimes our elderly in order to assure that they are able to function on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of trauma and responsibilities that Black young men have to reach. So in retrospect of it coming out, it comes out through aggression. It comes out through suspension. It comes out through trying to hold it in. And eventually we have to get to a point of being vulnerable, being able to be vulnerable within our Black boys and our Black youth, saying it is okay to have discussions that may feel uncomfortable. It is okay to feel like we have to be soft within our own environments in order to come out and become better contributors to society. It's okay to have that football and basketball dream, but not have to be the toughest person that is on the field or on a basketball court. It is imperative that within our youth that these suspension rates, the referrals to an IEP, expulsion decrease, and we substitute that with restorative conversation and restorative justice through the interventions that us as school psychologists and mental health providers within education system can provide, and how our teachers can show up within an education environment as mentors, as leaders, as wisdom advocates for our babies. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. White. Dr. Enya, I had a chance to, as researching for this, read some of your articles, and I think, you've taken a very interesting perspective on mental health. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the employment numbers for Black men have taken a steep nosedive between the end of 2025 and the beginning of 2026, with over 500,000 Black men losing their jobs in about a 4-month span of time. You wrote an article recently about employment being a health policy issue. Can you provide a quick overview of what you mean by that? How is, employment a health policy issue?
Yes, because half of this nation is employed, and if you have employer-sponsored insurance, then that impacts the extent to which you are able to get that coverage, obviously, and then actually take a step further to be seen by a healthcare provider. So it is directly tied in terms of employment, which is one of the several social drivers of health that I discuss. And so now, when given the bill that was signed into law what I'll frame as the one big ugly bill, which cut Medicaid for millions of people around the country. That also has a huge health policy impact in terms of having the ability to be seen by a healthcare provider. But to put a final point on the employment question, again, half the country has employer-sponsored insurance. But if for us as Black men, over 500,000 are losing jobs over the past 4 months in the tune of 500,000, then that means that we're not going to be able to at least have the insurance to be able to get to the doctor. And I'll also note that even if we have insurance, that doesn't mean that we're actually able to get access to a healthcare provider. Those are two different things. And so that is kind of the through line in terms of the employment as a social worker of health, and having insurance, and then actually what does that mean in terms of actually having someone to go to?
Thank you, Dr. Enya. I think, there's been a lot of great points in which you all are, making. So definitely we want to have this be a conversation. So if there's a point that, any of the other panelists may, feel free to jump in as well. So we wanted to make sure that we're giving, the audience as well-rounded a perspective as we can. I wanted to go back to you, Brother Ford. As we talked previously, you mentioned that the suicide rates amongst Black youth is on the rise. It said from 2007, 2020, the rate amongst young Black people ages 10 to 17 has increased 144%, according to the Pew Research Center. From your work, can you elaborate on some of the factors that are driving this trend, and how can we as communities respond?
Well, thank you, Doctor. And I'll just say also 18 to 25-year-old Black men, the third largest area of death is suicide. And so we talk about trauma early on. Everyone has adverse childhood experiences. There's 10 major adverse childhood experiences, and it can be like a death of a family member, someone incarcerated in the family, physical, sexual abuse, it could be emotional abuse, it could be a whole range of things. There's 10 major ones, but it can be argued that with African Americans, there's an enhanced list. And so if you have 3 to 4 adverse childhood experiences, it predicts some pretty dire things for you going forward. Both physical, social, the whole works. And so it could be argued that many of our men that are in prison, they're there because of adverse childhood experiences that weren't dealt with. The good news is that if some people are resilient enough to be able to transcend all kinds of trauma early on, they're resilient and they can bypass it and even thrive. We call that post-traumatic growth. And they can do that just naturally. Other people can do it with psychoeducation, with some of the gentlemen on this call, by being open to, first of all, engaging in culturally competent and culturally sensitive therapy. And so that's the good news. There's a lot of trauma to go around. I can't tell you how many people I talk to on a regular basis. And since my book was my first book, I've talked to 5 people that have published their own books. And I mean, I think that some of the stories that we read about, and it doesn't even seem like it's real. Some of the things that some of our young people have gone through, and they do this by themselves. So untreated childhood trauma, it shows up in other ways in terms of relationships, in terms of, unfortunately, some of the things we've been seeing with our Black women being killed, high profile situations. And in terms of just, it could be so daunting that if there's a trauma survivor, like, am I going to be doomed to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, or there's a way out of it? And the good news is that with psychoeducation and by reaching out to resource if those resources are available, and a lot of it goes back to policy insurances, then you can find that there are specific steps that you can take that can help you bypass some of those. And you don't have to become a statistic as a result of that. So I think these are the kind of conversations that's why this is such an important conversation that we're having here and across the board for men and women. And then, of course, the fact that we are an endangered species and we're targeted even more as African-American men. That's what we need to do to make sure that these things don't keep popping up on national news every week about women being killed, families being killed, suicide going through the roof. And so, again, so important for us to have these conversations and become more comfortable with them, normalize them, and take the stigma away from talking about mental health, specifically in our community.
Yeah. Thank you, Brother Ford. Dr. Enya mentioned the one big beautiful bill. Michael, I know that, you have a background, in politics and in, government as well. I kind of wanted to direct this a little towards you because, with the one, big, to a little bit more detail, it strips $1 trillion out of federal health programs, which includes Medicare, Medicaid, and then with the Affordable Care Act, not the subsidies being allowed to expire, that puts African Americans who may be on these particular assistance programs in jeopardy. And with, the current anti-DEI push where they are pulling grants from community-based organizations that would do healthcare into our communities, what has been the impact of these cuts to our community? What recourses do we have left with regarding to getting healthcare, providing healthcare to our communities in the face of, these current circumstances?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And that in itself is not only a mouthful, that in itself could push one over the edge, right? How do you manage that day to day? Your bills have ballooned. Your support from the government who made this promise to support you has now dissipated. The community that you thought was there to help and support you, now they're in the bread line with you or they're at the gas pump with you. The best way to get over this, and I really believe in this, is the voting box, is the ballot box. We can clearly send a message in November. We can clearly send a message in this upcoming primary, what we want America to look like and how it needs to look different. And not just on the federal level, on the state level, right? And on the local level, that's where these things matter the most. And I think this is where we see strength in coalitions. This is where we see strength in our local governments. This is where we see strength in our subject matter experts. It's the saying that, be it all, we all use this a lot, but nobody's coming to save us, right? So we have to we have to figure this out. And as you look towards the future and you start thinking about everything that's going on, everything, when you turn on the news, the depression, suppression, and oppression, that's where that strength from, beyond within with your brothers matters the most. And so I think the biggest way how we solve this is at the ballot box in November. We've got to send a message. And again, that's just not federally. That's with our state legislatures. That's with our Supreme Court justices. That's with our state attorneys, secretaries of states. And so the things that we want and the things that we need, we've got to prepare for that. And we have to advocate for that. I mean, look, nobody even and think about this, right? The Director of Health and Human Services. How many people know who that person is in their state, right? The Secretary of Health and Human Services, right? A lot of people don't even know who that is, right? They don't know where to get that funding from. A lot of states are now, putting forth their budgets for next year. And I can tell you just from, from the state, even from the state of New Jersey, they've had to slash their mental health resource budget, right? So, but we've got to get familiar with the process and the processes. And that's why just voting, just telling somebody just to vote, that's not enough. You got to tell them the power, what really their power in their vote, what that really means. And so I think that's the immediate solution.
Yeah. Thank you. And Brother White, go ahead.
I'll also add, it'll be important for us to attend community events and things that are happening that our politicians are throwing within our communities. There may be town halls, PTO conferences. These are avenues in which we know what's going on within our communities, what may be on the ballot that doesn't have to deal with people. For example, having hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars going to reconstruction or to different neighborhoods. In retrospect of how do we develop communities and how do we develop our system, whether it's politics, education, law, health. we have to pay attention to not only the people that's on the ballot, but the things that are being voted for, the yes and no ballot.
So this is fantastic, and this is, as a former staffer on Capitol Hill, I worked both in the House and the Senate, and part of my goal is to open up the aperture beyond just saying go vote. Right? It is about, for me, civic engagement and what that means more broadly. Right? And so I actually came up, and it's in my book. There are dozens of ways in which we can be civically engaged that is inclusive of voting, meaning building relationships with your local council members, with the judges, with mayors, with the state lawmakers, with members of Congress, with other key stakeholders, being very intentional about building relationships. Because for me, and I say this all the time, it's about chess, not checkers. What is our long game strategy? Yes, it's important to secure small wins and catch the lowest hanging fruit, but what is our long game strategy? What is our quote unquote Project 2025, right? And so this looks like setting up field tracking alerts. This looks like submitting testimony and testifying in front of council members or in Congress or in other spaces. This also looks like tracking regulatory guidelines, because it's one thing to actually draft and get a law enacted. It's another key part of the implementation piece. How are we going to hold people accountable to what has been drafted? Which means that regulatory process, submitting comments, is important. Obviously, calling and emailing your elected officials, posting on socials, protesting, rallying, yes, going to town halls, rallies, scheduling quarterly meetings with those elected, serving as a poll watcher or a poll judge. It means phone banking, canvassing, coordinating. It means coordinating fundraisers, donating to civic organizations, working a campaign. So I'm saying all of this to say that we need to know how to connect the dots, and to be able to message out in nuanced ways why it is important for all of us to be civically engaged, inclusive of the obvious voting, the ballot box. Yes. And so part of the messaging for me has now evolved to a place where it's okay. If you choose not to participate in the civic engagement process, you make it easier for people to make decisions for you, right? Because that pushes against the voter apathy and yes, like we get it, the voter suppression, all of those things. And I've said before, while we are living through some unique times right now, we have been here before. I'm thinking about the Reconstruction era, all of that, right? So we've been here before by and large. And so then the question becomes, what are we going to do differently? How are we going to move differently to ensure that our voices are heard loud and clear up and down the ballot?
Thank you, Dr. Enya. And this kind of brings up an idea for, a follow-up question. I'll put this out there for you all, and anyone who feels like answering, definitely jump in. Well, then, how do you deal with that sense of apathy, since it's like so much that is coming at Black people in the last year and a half? And there's some people who like, it doesn't matter if you vote or not, both parties are the same, all of that particular, stuff. How do you deal with that? How do you actually continue to try to motivate when a lot seems lost? We lost the Voting Rights Act, DEI is gone, the affirmative action, everything, all of the major achievements that helped African Americans throughout the 20th century has been rolled back. So within the face of this current climate, how do you motivate folks to still be involved, even though they may be tired, even though they may be fatigued?
I could start it up a little bit. I'll definitely say that you pretty much emphasize the fact that your vote this reason why affirmative action is trying to deplete the Voting Rights Act is trying to deplete because our vote is powerful. Our vote is that powerful. It's powerful to the fact that others have to combat it in order to get their agenda forward. So with other agendas forward, we still have a voice. Every vote counts. We make up 13% of the population as whole as African Americans, and approximately 5 to 6% as African American male between the ages of 18 through 45. We have a powerful say upon what happens within our country. We are deciding factors when it comes to a bill being passed, a person being in office, or a president being in office as well. We have that power, and we continuously have to not only vote, but understand what we're voting for when we get to the polls. That could mean the things that are happening locally within our community, within different funding going to different places. That could mean state legislators or our local legislators. These people are going to advocate for us, and we got to continuously show up to the door, to the off, in a sense of voting and advocating for our needs.
Thank you. Oh, Brother Ford.
I just think to his point, I think we need to always be on. Whether or not we are in suits in professional settings with professional organizations or in a barbershop breaking it down. I remember several years back, I had a conversation in a barbershop with some young folks that said, we don't care. When I was talking about the importance of voting. And I broke it down. I said, if you don't vote, I said, the guys that were in the discussion in the barbershop with me, they were all my age, 50 plus. But I said, the decisions that those that will get in office will make for the next 30, 40 years, they will impact you. And that's what we're seeing now in terms of these judges that are getting in at 40 years old and they're going to be in the Supreme Court until they're 85 years old. When it comes down to policy, it comes at everything that we see right now, the dismantling of everything, every norm and everything we fought for. As we hear all the time, elections have consequences. Sometimes you have to break it down to them. They think it's just, well, I don't feel like it's something that's short term, but no, this is a long term. It has long term implications as we see pain, which is very painful right now. Sometimes you just got to break it down to them wherever you are, at the gym, on the subway, wherever. Chat people up, and when you get pushed back, respectfully, inform and educate them, because a lot of people are not informed. A lot of people are low information, and they don't take the time to read up on things and check on reputable sites for information. And even though everybody's got a computer at their beck and call, but just have to these people everywhere we can and just show and talk about the long-term ramifications and how it affects them, the family, the children, and children's children. That's where we are now.
Mike? Oh, you're still on mute.
I'm sorry. Did you guys hear me?
Yeah, I was turning it over to Michael. Did you?
Okay, Michael's on mute.
I think you might be on mute. Oh, looks like he's frozen, but I'll turn it over to Dr. Enya if you had a statement to make.
Yeah, so, the social and governance structures that are in place, those that are in power, wouldn't be doing all that they have been doing if they were not afraid of our power.
Yeah.
Like that's how we need to think about this. Like that's the paradigm shift. They wouldn't be doing all of the voter suppression tactics, the voter ID laws, the roll purges, the polling place closures, the long lines, the Supreme Court decisions. They wouldn't be doing all of these things if they weren't actually afraid of our power. And so that, I think, at a very fundamental level, I argue that it does start with a mindset shift and thinking about why is there so much oppression and activity around us trying to actually get to the ballot box.
Yeah. Michael, I don't know if you had a statement you wanted to make.
No, I mean, I think everybody's made a great point. I think that the biggest, I mean, Doc, you said it. I think you have to, when you think about why we vote and the difference of why our other counterparts and brothers and sisters of America, why they vote, Moreover, for Black and brown folks, we vote for survival. We don't vote for capitalism. And believe it or not, they're the other party or whatever, or other people who are, that benefit more from the government, if you will. They vote for capitalism. So when you're constantly in this pit of survival, whether it's you're voting for survival, you're working for survival, and you have a job, which means what? Just over broke, right? You really kind of get in this rudder, and that's when the play on mental health is important the most. And so I think everybody made the point about being civically active, and that's why, again, in this moment, unlike since maybe civil rights or Reconstruction, as we're all framing this as Reconstruction 2.0. We have to be more civically active than we've ever been before, and it has to look different. And we don't have to be afraid for it to look different.
It seems like we have a question from the chat, so I'll bring that up. If you can see it on the screen. One of the questions we have from the attendees is, what happens when we vote for someone who talks a good talk but can't walk the walk that they talk about? So for those of you kind of in that political realm, what does that mean when a politician doesn't necessarily uphold all of the things that they say on the campaign trail?
Yeah, I'll start first. Campaign promises, and one of the things I've coached candidates through is never make a promise, particularly the Black communities. They've been promised everything for over 200 years and have received nothing. And the one thing to know about the American promise is we buy everything and sell nothing here in America, right? And so understand that when you're framing a conversation with a politician. But Dr. White said it best. That's why it's important to show up to that city council meeting. That's why it's important to testify at the state capitol. A lot of times things are getting done in the middle of the night, or things are getting done in broad daylight in the middle of the day, and nobody's there. Nobody's there to hold them accountable. The reality is, I understand how hard it is when you have a career, when you have kids, when you have a family, and sometimes you can't get there. But that's why civic power and civic groups are so important, and being and holding each other accountable, saying, you know what, there's a bill that's coming up, and we have to advocate for X. And how and when do you know when that bill comes up? We've got to know the makeup of our state, local, and federal governments, right? And so, how many of us know who our a Speaker of the House is in our state? How many of us, do you know the chairwoman, chairman or chairwoman of committee and said subcommittee, right? They're the ones who draft these legislations, right? They're the ones who draft these laws. And so you've got to hold them accountable. And then when they don't do what they do, or they don't do what you need them to do, there's this beautiful thing called, everybody says there's term limits. There's this beautiful thing called voting. And there's this other beautiful thing called run for something, right? And so I always tell folks don't tell me the problem if you don't have a solution. But two, if you have a solution, go run. Particularly now, people are tired of the same thing in the status quo. So I'll kick it over to Dr. White.
Appreciate you. I'll additionally add, because everything you said was spot on. Everyone wants to have some level of accountability of some type of tangible. Your tangible is right here. It is called 311. You dial 911 when we're in trouble, when we need an ambulance to come. We dial 988 when we are in crisis within a mental health situation. We dial 311 whenever we see something going on with our neighborhood or anything like that that is not being addressed. When there's a pothole, when there are dirty streets, when the garbage hasn't been taken out. Things that politicians can advocate for, that we are paying our tax dollars in order to ensure that everything that's going on with our neighborhood is going in accordance. We could hold accountability within dialing that number, keeping our logs in, and sending it back to wherever our Capitol Hill is at, or wherever the meetings that our politicians are having, saying, hey, I dialed 311. I am asking for these things to be repaired or these things to be done, and I'm not receiving a response. We keep that log. We keep that generational log, and we use our power as voters. We use our power as influential individuals, whether it's state, worldwide, or even in our communities, and we spread our word through our word of mouth and technology, through ensuring that our vote matters, what we say matters, what we need is matterable, and what we are aspiring for our future is being held. So one tool for sure, especially within this voting climate, 311. Dial 311. Say, this is going on in my community. I need this fixed. This is going on within my neighborhood. I need this repaired. I need a community engagement forum that deals with just talking. Where's the best place to hold this location? 311 is an excellent, excellent source to utilize.
Thank you, Brother White. I really like where this conversation is going. I kind of want to do a slight little pivot because as we talk about, mental health, we also need to talk about healthcare as well, because we know there has consistently been medical bias in the field. There was a study published in 2025 by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation that noted that white men could expect to live up to 5 years longer than Black men. We have distrust in the medical field because of obvious wrongdoings from the past, whether it's the Tuskegee experiments or current studies showing that doctors have biases who are currently practicing now against African Americans, whether they think our skin is thicker or we don't feel pain the same way any other races do. How can leaders address, misinformation and distrust so that Black men can feel comfortable and empowered taking their health into their own hands? I wanted to throw that out there for anyone, if anyone wanted to discuss a little bit more about that.
I could definitely start. All of us here are leaders in one way or another through different fields and through diverse backgrounds. We are all fortunate and we worked our tails off to be here. We have to start planting our seeds. And what I mean by planting our seeds is going back to communities that are in need, going back to areas and places that may need our support and show and advocate of what we can do. There are plenty of dentists, doctors, lawyers who are able to, whether do pro bono way or just advocate based on their field, come back and address needs that are available in the community. We definitely have to start planting seeds regarding what is available for us within 10, 20 years from now and address what's going on. For example, within middle school and high school Black males, you don't hear a lot that they want to be doctors or lawyers or X, Y, and Z, but we're starting to hear they want to become engineers because of different STEM projects that's going on through NSBE within the education system. Or we want to work within trades based off of CTE verification and take that into college as not only a utilized source of funding, but some sense of employment while going to college. We have to be able to address different metrics of career and vocational tools and within our communities, within our schools, in order to allow our population to grow. And that includes within our athletes. Our athletes are doing phenomenal, phenomenal. Jalen Brunson is doing phenomenal in himself. And the way that our athletes give back, along with everyone that surrounds their circle, gives back to our communities and along other that just are politicians, politics, excuse me, they are able to address needs that we haven't been able to have within the last 10, 20 years regarding careers and regarding college, regarding having access to this level of community and health. So definitely, let's start planting our seeds, especially within this climate.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll say a few things to add to that. You tend to become what you see. And having this conversation today is an example of providing credible information to push back against the misinformation and disinformation. It's having these types of conversations. And I'll also note that it's important for us who are leaders to be strategic in how we want to rest, because rest is resistance. This is a marathon and not a sprint. Mm-hmm. And so as we are raising families and leading in our respective communities, etc., it is being mindful of taking time for yourself, right? So the self-care, the self-maintenance, the soul care, which for me looks like journaling, prayer, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, traveling, deep tissue massages, all of those things that keep me sane and grounded. or bring me joy and remind me of why of who and whose I am are critically important for the long game to be able to support the next generation. And then, of course, for me, it's seeing a Black male psychologist regularly, having an executive coach, and so that's number one. Number two is the training of healthcare providers. So only 6% of doctors in the United States are Black. 6% of Black physicians in the US. There are only 3% of Black men physicians in the US. And that has not changed for decades. In fact, it's getting worse. There are only 4% of Black psychologists in the US. Mm-hmm. There are only 2% of Black psychiatrists in the US. So you see the long-standing disparities and the pipeline, which is critically important for us to attempt to address the bias and the misinformation as well, if we can support funding to bring in culturally humble providers across the ecosystem, that see us for us and can meet us where we are. That is a critical game changer. And the third thing I'll say briefly is teaching critical thinking skills as early on as is possible. How do we teach our children, our communities, our loved ones how to think critically about the information that we consume, right? How do we follow healthy content and unfollow unhealthy content, right? So really being thoughtful about the ways in which you want to consume content that is credible, that is healthy, and that facilitates you having the credible information to engage with your local, with your elected officials in ways that can shift health outcomes, because we know that those communities that are more civically engaged experience better health outcomes. Yeah.
And I kind of want to stay on this point of self-care. Brother Ford, how do you manage kind of self-care?
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for all of the great medical insights that I think is so important. If you can, because not everybody can eat at home at Whole Foods, but if you can eat as healthy as we can eat, exercise, and then being open, as Dr. India said, being open to therapy. I have a therapist, and so that, and if you do not have a village, be it Greek life, be it church, be it whatever, if you do not have a village, create one. And because connectedness is really important too. Recent statistics said that loneliness is just as insidious in terms of health outcomes as being sedentary. And so we have to take care of ourselves on a daily basis and be open to just saying, hey, I'm not okay. I need to talk to somebody. And if that is in whatever setting you have, of course, in organizations like this, there's no shortage of educated Black men that are very, very well versed in all of these disciplines. But sometimes we feel like everybody's okay there. I don't want to approach this person because of that. I don't want to say this because of credentials, because of status. But we're all human. All of us are human, and we're all going to be tested. It's not a question of if; it's when are we going to be tested. And when we're tested, we need to make sure that there's a framework of support that's there early enough for us to be able to reach out, so that we don't have some of the outcomes that come about when we're not vulnerable. So vulnerability is not weakness; it's strength. Vulnerability is not weakness; it's strength, and it could save your life.
And Michael, I'll throw that same question to you. Kind of, how do you self-care?
I mean, I wish I had Dr. Enya's bank account. I started taking notes, and I started just listening to everything go cha-ching, cha-ching. So I said that ain't gonna work for me. No, I really try to. I really, one of the things I really try to do is laugh. Laughter is one of the best cures. Whether you laugh at yourself, whether I listen to some old Robin Harris or Richard Pryor, Bernie Mac, or one of the things as a father, and we don't talk about this enough. As a father, we really have a hard time finding happiness outside of either your kids or your job, right? And sometimes both of those things need rest. And Dr. Anya said that, and I think Brother White said that. Both of those things need rest, and you have to find vocation outside of those. But one of the things, I try to laugh every day. I really do try to laugh, whether it's at myself, whether it's something at work. And don't think, excuse me, don't take this thing too seriously. We take life too seriously. The one thing we're promised is that we're going to be out of here. Obviously, with your vocation, sure, you want to take that serious in your fellowship. But really, that'll stress you out, right? That'll burn you out. And just, give yourself grace. Understand that you're human. You have limitations. And I think, that's what resilience is. That's what resilience looks like. And to me, resilience is a cuss word. I hate when people say, well, kids are resilient. That's not fair to them. Why are you resilient at 13? That's, you haven't even seen anything yet. Why do you have to be resilient, right? Or as a Black man in America, oh no, we're resilient. That's a curse word to me. What if I don't want to be resilient, right? What if I want this? I want to sit with this for a little bit. But that's why I try to laugh. I try to laugh as much as I can. And I think that's even how I show up as an executive. I probably show up with more humor than I do professionality all the time. And I tell people, Dr. Anya, see me in live in the flesh. What you see is what you get. I'm no different from in a professional setting to a private setting, outside of a few cuss words and a cigar. So I just really try to have fun with this thing called life. He's laughing hard because he knows it's the truth.
And Michael, you brought up an idea to me as you were just speaking, which is like the pressure that we as Black men have to feel like we got to get over it, we got to get past it, we can't let anything impact us or affect us. I wanted to put this out to the group as well, and whoever feels free to answer is like, how do you deal with that? Which is, you got to put on that mask, and you got to make, as opposed to just being able to sit with it and be like, what, I'm tired, Brother Ford.
Let me say this real quick. Our sisters under siege as well. 600,000 lost their jobs in the last 12 months. They have been surgically sought out. Algorithms, our sisters are struggling too, and they need our help as well. But with that said, whoever we love, I did something similar to this in 24, and people asked, is it for men or just for women? And my answer was, it's for men and for those that love us. And so those that love us, those that mama, grandma, auntie, cousin, lover, whoever you love, they need to understand that we have to feel safe and comfortable enough to come to them and not be viewed as weak. Safe enough to come and not be viewed in a different way, because we show the strength, and then okay, now he's got his head in my lap. Okay, so that's a big because we have nobody to go to at work. Organizations don't, in terms of where we work organizationally, but there's got to be a safe space at home for both of us. And I think it's a time, if any of the time, with all the strife sometime between Black men and Black women, this is a time for us to come together as more than any other time in our history, because we've done this before as well. And so we have to lean into investing in each other and hearing each other, seeing each other, and understanding that they need us like we need them. And then we need to be comfortable enough to be able to go to those that love us and those that we plan families with, because this is a long-term, like you said, it's not a marathon. Not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so just having safe spaces, both they have a safe space with us and we have a safe space with them. We need you. We need you, women, Black women, and you need us as well. And so those conversations need to be a front of mind as well.
Now, as we're looking at the time, we're kind of getting close to the end. I just wanted to give each of the panelists an opportunity to give some final, parting words. I didn't know if Brother White, you had anything you wanted to say, kind of close this discussion.
Absolutely. First thing, I love y'all, and I greatly appreciate everyone on this panel, everyone who is watching at home, for just giving us the space to converse with you all. The ultimate medicine is not only humor, but tears, crying. We are made with flesh and blood and red blood cells and white blood cells, which means you're human. You have the ability to cry. You have the ability to dream. Please give your space and let out and cry. In regards to my field in mental health education, trust me, you are doing an amazing job, kids. I call my kids my babies, all thousands of my kids within the DMV that I've served in New York as well. You are my babies. I love y'all and I appreciate you all. Keep dreaming, keep talking to us as educators, as mentors. Do not be shy to ever ask a question because we may not have the answer, but we will definitely come back in order to serve you. You are our future. You are going to be the reason why I get to live to be 100 years old. Not because of my 45-year-old uncle, my 55-year-old cousin. It's because of you 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 year olds and your rest of the high school students that are going to be able to make a difference and power within our communities. Please use us, abuse us within the sense of need and urgency because we need you all to show up in the polls. We need you all to show up to spaces like us to lean a shoulder on, to cry, to laugh, to be part of our community because we love you and we care about you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother White. I wanted to go to Dr. Enya if you had any parting thoughts as well.
Yeah, so I named several self-care aspects of my regimen that are actually free, uh, but also noting that there is a very important affordability component to seeking therapy, and so I want to acknowledge that can be a barrier or a challenge. However, there's a plethora of free mental health services and resources that are available. You got the apps. You got if you are employed, you have the employment assistance program where you're provided 6 free sessions. So that there are ways in which we can navigate the self-care journey, and then as you're able to make progress and evolve and grow, then you can further invest in yourself, right? So, and I'll also note that in the context of journaling, it is a powerful thing to learn how to name your emotions or to label your emotions. There's something about the doing a brain dump and just getting your thoughts out on paper, as was mentioned earlier, that will bring down the levels of adrenaline and cortisol, which will also bring some clarity to what you're actually thinking, right? So there's a process there, and I'll close by saying that that in the context of community, you cannot be your best self by yourself. It takes community. It takes all of us. You cannot be your best self by yourself, and you cannot pour from an empty cup. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Enya. I wanted to go to Michael Bland if you wanted to give any final remarks before we close everything up.
Yeah, no, again, thank you so much for the fraternity doing this. Sitting with you brothers has brought joy to me this evening. The one thing I remind you all is you're not rowing the boat by yourself. Lean on your network, lean on your community, and have your own principles. Sit with your family tonight, sit with your friends, and sit with yourself and develop your principles. And for me and my girls, and I'm a girl dad, big time girl dad, is God, family, and culture. We do everything to uplift Christ, and we do everything around us for Christ. Our family is the most important thing to us, and don't ever forget the culture, because the culture is what genuinely and really makes America great, not what somebody else says. And if you have not made yourself laugh today, go laugh. If you've not given yourself a chance to cry, go cry. But try to get yourself to laugh at something every day. And my last point is get a theme song because you deserve to walk to your own beat.
Thank you. And I'll end with Brother Ford.
Thank you, brothers. I love you. There's nothing you can do about it. Proud of each and every one of you. We need to tell each other we love each other and we're proud of each other wherever we see it. And again, to Black women to listen, we still choose you. We need you. And you also need us. So if we can look up, we can get up. We can look up and get up together. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you, brothers. Just in closing, I really wanted to thank you all for joining us for this important discussion. Conversations like this can easily go on for another hour, hour and a half, but, of course, we're at our time. And, we encourage everybody, who is watching to continue this discussion with your family, with your friends, your networks, because, this is an important discussion and we just only scratched the surface. For those of you that feel like maybe you need a little more support, explore local organizations that focus on Black male mental health, such as Black Men Heal. There are many forms of support, whether it's group therapy, individual counseling, peer support, or mentorship. Find whatever works best for you. This is a serious time in our country, and Black men, our presence are needed in our communities more than it's been needed in decades. And so to fully show up for our community, you have to show up for yourself first. Prioritize your mental health. Together we can, combat that stigma around seeking help, just to make sure that people feel comfortable and that it should be treated as normal as going to get preventative care like you would for your annual physical. There's nothing weak about seeking help. It actually takes courage and strength to identify particular problems that you may have and go seek professional help and for someone to kind of help you navigate through it. As we wrap up, I want to once again sincerely thank our panelists here for their insight. Each of them brought expertise and their background to this discussion, which made it a very fulsome conversation. I just want you all to think about keeping the conversation going. Take care of yourself and remember your mental health matters. So thank you and good night.